Story number 1. Shadows on the Ice. The winter in Minnesota was unforgiving, a relentless grip of cold that seemed to seep into every corner of existence. I still remember the first time I saw Lake Silvermere in the dead of winter. It was a vast expanse of glassy ice, stretching out beneath a blanket of snow, the surface so smooth it mirrored the bleak, overcast sky. My name is Mark Thompson, and what was supposed to be a simple weekend fishing trip with friends turned into a nightmare that still haunts me to this day. Jake, Emma, and Ryan had been planning this trip for months. As seasoned outdoorsmen, we sought the solitude and challenge that Lake Silvermere offered. The locals spoke of its serene beauty and the abundant fish that thrived beneath the ice. But there were also whispers, stories of the lake holding more than just fish, of spirits trapped beneath the frozen surface, yearning for release. We arrived on a Friday afternoon, the sun hanging low and weak in the sky. The wind was biting, carrying the scent of pine and the distant sound of wood cracking. Setting up our gear, we drilled holes into the ice, the rhythmic sound echoing across the silent expanse. The sky darkened quickly, the first hints of twilight signaling the approach of night. As we settled around our fishing gear, sharing stories and laughter to stave off the encroaching darkness, the stillness of the lake was broken by an unsettling howl. It was deep and mournful, unlike any animal call we had ever heard. Jake dismissed it with a laugh. "Probably just a lone wolf," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. The ice around us felt unusually thick, almost as if the lake was holding its breath. We fished in silence, the eerie howl lingering in the back of our minds, creating a tension that hung heavy in the air. Late into the night, as we huddled in our tents, the temperature plummeted. The wind howled louder, and the howl we heard earlier seemed to grow more persistent, echoing through the trees like a spectral wail. Suddenly, Jake jolted awake, his face pale and eyes wide with terror. "Guys, come quick," he whispered urgently. I saw something moving under the ice. It was a shadow, dark and massive. We rushed to his tent, the cold biting through our layers as we gathered our gear. Jake led us to the edge of the camp, where the moonlight reflected off the ice in a ghostly shimmer. There, barely visible beneath the surface, was a dark shape gliding swiftly across the frozen lake. It moved too gracefully and too quickly to be any known fish. "That's not a fish," Emma said, her voice trembling. "What is it?" Before anyone could respond, the ice beneath our feet began to crack, sending plumes of snow and shards of ice into the air. Panic surged through us as we realized we were in immediate danger. We scrambled to retreat to our tents, but the ice was shifting, becoming unstable beneath our weight. In the chaos, Jake slipped, falling through the fragile ice with a strangled cry. We watched in horror as he disappeared into the darkness below, the icy surface sealing over almost instantly. The howls intensified, a cacophony of anguish and rage that filled the night air. "We have to get out of here," Ryan shouted, his voice breaking with fear. "We need to call for help." But our phones had no signal, and the storm had severed any chance of contacting the outside world. The realization hit us hard: Jake was gone, swallowed by the very lake we had come to cherish. Despair and fear gnawed at us as we huddled together, the howls of the dogmen, the legend of Lake Silvermere, reverberating through the night. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a haunting silence. We trudged through the snow to our truck, the memory of Jake's desperate screams etched into our minds. As we prepared to leave, a sense of foreboding settled over us. The lake, once a place of beauty, now felt like a malevolent presence, its surface hiding unspeakable horrors. When we reached the nearest town, we sought help, but the locals seemed unfazed by our tale. The sheriff listened politely but offered no immediate assistance. "Lake Silvermere is a remote area," he said. "Search and rescue will take time. We'll send a team out first thing in the morning." That night, unable to sleep, I stood by our truck, staring into the frozen expanse of Lake Silvermere. The howls had ceased, replaced by an oppressive stillness that felt like the calm before a storm. Suddenly, I saw movement, glowing yellow eyes staring back at me from the darkness. My heart raced as I recognized the creature. The dogman, a figure of local legend, was real. It stood tall and imposing, its body muscular and covered in coarse fur, with a head that blended human and canine features seamlessly. Its eyes burned with an otherworldly light, and its presence exuded a sense of sorrow and rage. Why did you take him? I whispered, tears welling up in my eyes. The dogman let out a mournful howl, the sound filled with both anguish and a deep, unspoken pain. It began to move towards me, each step deliberate and heavy, the ground beneath its feet seemingly responding to its sorrowful intent. I stumbled back, my mind racing to find a way to communicate or appease the creature. Please, he's my friend. Let him go. The dogman paused, its glowing eyes softening slightly, as if understanding my plea. Then, with a flicker of movement, it gestured towards the lake, its message clear. There was something trapped beneath the surface, a restless spirit yearning for release. Determined to save Jake and end the nightmare, I decided to return to the lake with a plan. Armed with a flashlight, a camera, and whatever tools we had left, I braved the cold, navigating the treacherous ice once more. The howls had returned, louder and more desperate, guiding me towards the heart of the lake. As I reached the spot where Jake had fallen, I saw the remnants of a campsite, broken fishing rods, a torn tent, and a locket that Jake had been wearing, now cracked and frozen. Kneeling by the ice, I began to speak, my voice steady despite the fears that gripped me. "We're sorry for what happened," I said, tears streaming down my face. "We didn't mean for this to happen. Please, let him go." The lake seemed to respond, the surface rippling as if acknowledging my words. The dogman appeared beside me, its presence both comforting and terrifying. It reached out, its large hand gently touching the ice. Suddenly, a light emanated from beneath the surface, and the ice began to thaw, revealing a submerged figure struggling to break free. Jake's lifeless body floated to the surface, the ice surrounding him melting away as if by magic. The dogman watched, its eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and relief, before fading into the night, leaving me alone with the lifeless body of my friend and the shattered remnants of our weekend trip. In the days that followed, the town of Silvermere became aware of our ordeal. Jake's disappearance and the eerie legends of the dogman were now intertwined in local lore. The lake, once a place of beauty and serenity, now held a darker, more ominous presence, a reminder of the thin veil between the living and the restless spirits trapped beneath the ice. I returned to my life with a heavy heart, the memory of that night etched into my soul. The dogman of Lake Silvermere became more than just a legend, it was a symbol of the unforgiving wilderness and the mysterious forces that lie hidden within. The experience taught me the importance of respect for nature and the unseen, the balance between curiosity and caution in the face of the unknown. But sometimes, when the wind whispers through the trees and the moon casts a silvery glow on the frozen lake, I catch a glimpse of glowing eyes watching from the darkness, a silent guardian ensuring that the spirits of Lake Silvermere remain undisturbed. It's a haunting reminder that some legends hold a kernel of truth, and that the wilderness is a realm where the past and present intertwine in ways we can scarcely comprehend. And as I sit by the warmth of my home, reflecting on the horrors we faced, I know that the shadows on the ice will forever linger in my mind, a testament to the night we encountered the dogman and the spirits that dwell beneath the frozen surface of Lake Silvermere. Story number 2. Shadows in the Snow. Winter in the Adirondack National Forest was a magical, albeit harsh, spectacle. The landscape transformed into a pristine wonderland, with snowflakes dancing gracefully from the sky, blanketing the earth in a thick, white layer. For Lisa and her family, this winter getaway was a much-needed escape from the relentless pace of city life. They sought solace in the tranquility of nature, eager to embrace the joys of skiing and the serene beauty that only a snowy forest could offer. Our cabin was nestled deep within the woods, a cozy retreat surrounded by towering pines and the silent, undisturbed beauty of untouched snow. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine and the distant sound of a babbling brook frozen under ice. It was the perfect setting for a peaceful family vacation, or so we thought. On the second day of our stay, Lisa and her husband, Mark, decided to take a hike through one of the less-traveled trails. Their 10-year-old son, Jake, insisted on joining, his boundless energy and curiosity making him an enthusiastic companion. The trail was serene, with only the crunch of our boots on the snow and the occasional call of a distant bird breaking the silence. As we ventured deeper into the forest, Jake's excitement grew. "Look, Mom. Those footprints are huge," he exclaimed, pointing to a series of deep impressions in the snow beside the path. They were unlike any animal tracks we'd seen before, massive, with claw-like indentations that suggested something far larger and more menacing than a bear or a wolf. Mark knelt down to examine the prints more closely. "These are definitely not from any animal I've seen around here," he said thoughtfully. "They're too large and the shape is unusual." Lisa, ever the practical one, pulled out her smartphone. "Let me take a picture. Maybe we can figure out what made these." She snapped a few photos and, with a chuckle, posted one on social media with the caption, "Looks like we've got a real-life snowman on our hands." We continued our hike, occasionally glancing back at the mysterious footprints. The trail eventually led us to a small clearing by the frozen stream, where the snow lay undisturbed, as if untouched by any creature. The serenity of the place was almost eerie, the silence so profound that it felt like the world had stopped. That evening, as we gathered around the fireplace in the cabin, the warmth of the flames contrasting sharply with the biting cold outside, Lisa's phone buzzed with notifications from her social media post. Friends and followers reacted with a mix of amusement and curiosity, sharing their own stories and theories about the mysterious snowman. "Maybe it's a new type of animal," Jake suggested, his eyes wide with excitement. "Or maybe it's something magical." Mark laughed. "Whatever it is, it's definitely not something we've dealt with before. But it's kind of cool, don't you think?" Lisa smiled, though a lingering uneasy nod at the back of her mind. The Adirondacks had always been a place of natural beauty, but the strange footprints had introduced an element of the unknown that she couldn't quite shake off. That night, as the family settled into their beds, the wind began to howl outside, whipping the snow into frenzied patterns against the windows. The howling was different from any storm we've experienced, deeper, more resonant, almost like a distant, mournful cry that echoed through the forest. In the middle of the night, Lisa was awakened by a strange noise outside. It was a soft scraping, like heavy claws dragging across the ice. Her heart raced as she lay still, listening intently. The noise grew louder, more deliberate, as if something, or someone, was moving closer to the cabin. She reached for her phone, turning on the flashlight app and cautiously peeking through the window. Her breath caught in her throat. Standing at the edge of the clearing was a towering figure, its silhouette dark against the pale moonlight. The creature was massive, far larger than any human, with elongated limbs and what appeared to be fur covering its body. Its eyes glowed a menacing yellow, fixed directly on the cabin. "Mark, wake up!" Lisa whispered urgently, shaking her husband awake. Mark groggily opened his eyes, blinking against the sudden brightness of the flashlight. "What is it?" he asked, his voice thick with sleep. Lisa pointed towards the window. "Look!" Mark followed her gaze, his eyes widening in disbelief and fear. The creature was still there, staring at us with an intensity that sent chills down his spine. Without a word, he reached for a flashlight and moved to secure the windows, trying to shield us from whatever horror lurked outside. The creature let out a low, guttural growl, a sound that reverberated through the night air. It began to move towards the cabin, each step heavy and deliberate, the ground trembling beneath its weight. Lisa grabbed Jake, pulling him close as Mark attempted to barricade the door. "Stay inside," Mark instructed, his voice steady despite the fear that gripped him. "Don't let it in." The creature paused, its glowing eyes locked onto our family. For a moment, time seemed to stand still, the only sounds the howling wind and the distant scraping of claws on snow. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, it turned and vanished back into the darkness, leaving us shaken but unharmed, for now. The next morning, the snow-covered landscape looked almost magical, but the memory of the previous night's encounter cast a shadow over our spirits. As we packed up to leave, we noticed something strange. Traces of the creature's presence had been left behind. The snow around the cabin was scorched and scraped, the ground marked by deep, claw-like indentations that mirrored the footprints Jake had found earlier. Before we could process what was happening, we heard a loud screech from the back of the cabin. Rushing outside, we found the back door jammed, the lock torn off and the frame damaged as if something had tried to break in. Fear tightened its grip on us as we realized the creature's presence was not just a one-time visit. Determined to leave, we loaded our belongings into the car and prepared to drive away. But as we started the engine, we were met with an unsettling sight in the rearview mirror. The same glowing yellow eyes stared back at us from the edge of the forest, and the silhouette of the dogman loomed in the distance, watching us intently. "Stay calm," Mark instructed, though his voice trembled. "It's probably just following us. We'll lose it in the traffic." But as we sped down the snowy roads, the dogman remained a constant presence in the mirror, its eyes never leaving us, its form occasionally shifting and moving with unnatural speed. The snow-covered trees blurred past as we accelerated, the creature seemingly keeping pace with us, relentless in its pursuit. Panic set in as we realized we couldn't outrun the dogman. Every time we glanced in the mirror, it was still there, a silent, menacing shadow that refused to let us escape. The roads twisted and turned, the dense forest surrounding us like a living entity, making it impossible to see beyond the immediate path. Suddenly, the car lurched violently, the engine sputtering and dying. We tried to restart it, but the vehicle wouldn't budge. Stranded in the middle of nowhere, the realization hit us hard, we were trapped, with the dogman closing in on us. "Get out," Mark urged, his voice strained. "We have to find help." But as we stepped out of the car, the snow seemed to come alive, the ground beneath our feet trembling as the dogman emerged from the shadows, its presence overwhelming. The creature advanced towards us, its eyes burning with a dark, unholy light. The air grew thick with an oppressive energy, and the howls of the forest seemed to merge with the creature's own mournful cries. In a desperate attempt to defend ourselves, we grabbed whatever we could find, sticks, rocks, anything, to fend off the dogman. But it was no use. The creature was too powerful, too relentless. It moved with a terrifying grace, each strike more brutal than the last, its claws leaving deep gouges in the snow and the ground. Lisa screamed as a sharp pain tore through her leg, the creature's claws embedding themselves into her flesh. Mark and Jake tried to help her, but the dogman was relentless, its rage fueled by an unknown torment. The snow around us became a battleground, the pristine landscape now marred by violence and fear. As the night wore on, the family fought for survival, their once peaceful vacation now a fight against an ancient, malevolent force. The howling wind and the creature's relentless attacks created a symphony of horror that echoed through the frozen forest, a nightmarish testament to the legends of the Adirondacks. Just when all hope seemed lost, a faint light appeared in the distance, a faint glow that promised salvation. With their last reserves of strength, Mark, Lisa, and Jake dragged themselves towards the light, the dogman's howls growing fainter as they neared the source of the illumination. Bursting through the trees, they stumbled upon a ranger station, its windows aglow with warmth and safety. Exhausted and battered, they collapsed at the entrance, the dogman pausing at the edge of the clearing, watching them with sorrowful eyes before retreating back into the darkness. The next morning, we were found by a search party, the remnants of our ordeal etched into our bodies and minds. The dogman had vanished as mysteriously as it had appeared, leaving behind only the scars of its presence and the haunting memories of that fateful night. In the aftermath, the legends of the dogman in the Adirondack National Forest took on a new level of credibility. Our story became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the thin line between myth and reality, and the dangers that lurk beneath the pristine surface of nature's beauty. For Lisa, Mark, and Jake, the experience left an indelible mark. They carried the scars of that night, both visible and invisible, a constant reminder of the malevolent presence that had hunted them through the snow. The Adirondacks, with their majestic beauty and hidden horrors, had proven to be a place where the past and present intertwined, where legends were not just stories, but living, breathing entities that demanded respect and fear. As the years passed, the story of our encounter spread, adding another layer to the rich tapestry of folklore that defined the Adirondack National Forest. The dogman became a symbol of the wilderness's untamed and mysterious nature, a guardian of the forest that would forever watch over those who dared to venture too deep into its icy embrace. And sometimes, on cold winter nights, when the wind howls through the pines and the moon casts long shadows on the snow, I can't help but glance towards the forest, half expecting to see those glowing yellow eyes watching from the darkness. It's a haunting reminder that some legends are rooted in truth, and that the wilderness holds secrets that are best left undisturbed. For those who heed the warnings and respect the power of nature, the Adirondacks remain a place of breathtaking beauty and serene solitude. But for those who ignore the signs and venture too far into the unknown, the shadows and the snow hold a darkness that is unforgiving, a reminder that some legends are best left as tales whispered around the fire on a cold winter night. Story number 3. Whispers of the Frozen Mailman. The Rocky Mountains in Colorado are a majestic sight, their snow-capped peaks piercing the clear blue sky, a testament to nature's grandeur and indifference. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I've always found solace in the serene isolation of our small mountain village, Evergreen Ridge. As a nurse, my days are filled with the rhythms of hospital life, but the winters here offer a different kind of peace, a quiet that blankets not just the landscape, but my restless mind as well. It was mid-December when the first snowstorm of the season hit Evergreen Ridge. The village, nestled between towering pines and jagged cliffs, transformed overnight into a winter wonderland. The roads became impassable, the wind howled through the trees, and the world seemed to slow beneath the thick blanket of snow. Despite the harsh conditions, there was a beauty to the storm that captivated me every year. On the second day of the storm, I was working the night shift at the local clinic. The power flickered intermittently, a common occurrence during heavy snowfalls, but tonight felt different. The storm seemed to carry a weight, a sense of foreboding that pressed against the windows of the clinic. As I attended to patients with frostbitten toes and hypothermia, my mind kept drifting to the stories the older residents shared about the mountain and its hidden secrets. When my shift ended around 3 a.m., the clinic was quiet, save for the soft hum of the generators. Exhausted, I packed up my things and began the trek back to my cabin. The snow was deep, crunching under my boots with each step. The wind whipped around me, carrying with it whispers that seemed to echo my thoughts. I shivered, pulling my coat tighter around me, but the chill wasn't just from the cold. As I approached my cabin, I noticed a familiar figure standing at the edge of the clearing. It was the old mailman, Mr. Harold Jenkins, who had been missing for over 50 years. Harold was a fixture in Evergreen Ridge, known for his punctual deliveries and kind demeanor. One bitter winter night, he vanished without a trace during a blizzard, leaving behind unanswered questions and a village that never forgot him. But how was Harold still here, 50 years later? Before I could process what I was seeing, Harold raised a hand and beckoned me closer. His coat was tattered, his face pale and hollow, eyes sunken with an eternal sorrow. "Keep warm," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the howling wind. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. "Harold? Is that you?" He nodded slowly, a sad smile touching his lips. "Keep warm." Before I could respond, he faded into the swirling snow, leaving me standing alone in the icy night. My mind raced, struggling to reconcile the apparition with the reality of the missing mailman from decades ago. Shaking off the encounter as a hallucination brought on by the storm and exhaustion, I hurried into the cabin, locking the door behind me. Inside, the cabin was dimly lit by the soft glow of a kerosene lamp. I placed my keys on the counter and sank into my favorite armchair, trying to calm my racing thoughts. As I reached for a blanket, my eye caught something unusual, a package sitting on the doorstep, untouched by snow. It was odd because I was sure I hadn't ordered anything. Curiosity piqued, I picked it up and noticed the return address was the old post office, long since closed after Harold's disappearance. With trembling hands, I carried the package inside and carefully opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, its edges worn and the ink faded. The handwriting was shaky, almost illegible, but the message was clear. "Don't look further. Once you know, you can't escape." A chill ran down my spine as I read the words. I glanced around the cabin, feeling the weight of the storm pressing in. That night, as the wind howled outside and the snow piled higher, the unsettling feeling lingered. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just an old man's ghostly warning. But sleep was elusive. Every creak of the cabin, every gust of wind felt amplified, as if the storm was trying to communicate something. Around midnight, the windows rattled violently, snow slamming against the panes. A cold draft swept through the room, extinguishing the lamp and plunging me into darkness. My breath visible in the frigid air, I heard the unmistakable sound of knocking. Kook! It was a slow, deliberate knock, echoing through the cabin. My heart raced as I approached the window, peering into the storm. There, standing on the ice-covered ground, was Harold Jenkins. His eyes met mine, hollow and pleading. "Mom, help me," he whispered, his voice breaking the silence. "The snow trapped us. We can't leave." I stepped back, my mind reeling. "Harold? What do you mean?" He looked down, his expression one of despair. "The storm, it wasn't natural. It trapped me and my colleagues here, frozen in time. We can't move on. Please, keep the storm at bay. Before I could respond, the temperature in the cabin plummeted further. The howling wind outside seemed to penetrate every corner, and the shadows in the room grew longer, darker. The knocking resumed, more frantic now, as if desperate to get inside. Realizing that Harold wasn't just a ghost, but something more, I remembered the stories of the mountain spirits and the legends that older residents told about the restless souls trapped by unnatural storms. The package and Harold's appearance were signs that something malevolent was at play, something that didn't want us to uncover the truth. Determined to help Harold and break the curse that bound him to the frozen storm, I decided to delve into the history of Evergreen Ridge and the mysterious disappearance of the mailman. The following day, with the storm still raging outside, I ventured into the village to seek answers. The town was quiet, the streets deserted by most, the few remaining residents huddled indoors, avoiding the howling winds. I made my way to the old post office, now nothing more than a crumbling building covered in snow. Inside, the air was thick with dust, the remnants of a bygone era frozen in time. I searched through old records and newspaper clippings, piecing together the story of Harold Jenkins and the fateful night he vanished. According to the archives, Harold and a few other mail carriers were caught in an unprecedented blizzard. Rescue teams searched for days, but no trace was found. Some speculated that the storm was a freak occurrence, while others whispered of darker forces at work, of curses and restless spirits unable to find peace. One particular article caught my eye, Mystery of the Frozen Postman Unsolved. It detailed Harold's dedication to his job, his commitment to delivering mail regardless of the weather, and the heartbreaking loss of a beloved community member. But there was no mention of supernatural elements, just a tragedy lost to time. Frustrated by the lack of information, I returned to the cabin, determined to confront Harold and understand the true nature of the storm. As night fell, the wind howled even louder, the storm now a living entity that seemed to respond to my presence. Once again, Harold appeared at the window, his eyes filled with sorrow. Please, find the source of the storm. Release us from this frozen nightmare. I knew what I had to do. I recalled the old legends of appeasing the spirits, of performing rituals to honor their memories and seek their forgiveness. Armed with this knowledge, I began to prepare, gathering the necessary items from the cabin, candles, salt, and the worn journal I had found hidden beneath a loose floorboard. As the storm reached its peak, I set up a makeshift altar near the window, the candles flickering defiantly against the raging winds. I placed the journal and a few personal items that belonged to Harold, his old cap, a faded photograph of the village, and a lock of his hair, on the altar, creating a tangible connection between the living and the restless spirits. Harold, I began, my voice steady despite the fear gripping me, I honor your memory and those of your colleagues. Please, let the storm pass and allow you to find peace. The wind seemed to respond, the howling growing louder as if trying to drown out my words. The shadows in the room twisted and contorted, the temperature dropping to unbearable levels. But I pressed on, reciting the words of the ritual with unwavering determination. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light filled the cabin, pushing back the darkness and the storm's malevolent energy. The howling ceased abruptly, replaced by a profound silence that enveloped the room. I felt a sense of release, as if the spirits were finally being freed from their eternal torment. Harold stood before me once more, his form shimmering with a gentle light. Thank you, he whispered, his voice now filled with gratitude and peace. The storm has been lifted. We are free. As the light faded, the temperature in the cabin returned to normal, the oppressive weight lifted from my shoulders. The storm outside began to subside, the winds calming and the snow settling softly to the ground. Exhausted but relieved, I knew that the curse had been broken, that the spirits of Evergreen Ridge were finally at rest. In the days that followed, the village slowly returned to its usual rhythm. The storm had left its mark, but the sense of peace that followed was palpable. I shared my experience with the few remaining residents, who listened with a mix of awe and relief, grateful that the restless spirits had been appeased. But the memory of that night lingered, a haunting reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead, and the power of compassion to bridge the gap. The legend of the frozen mailman became a story of redemption, of a community coming together to honor and release those who had been lost to the unforgiving winter. As I sit by my fireplace, reflecting on the events that unfolded, I am reminded of the strength of the human spirit and the enduring bonds that tie us to those who came before. Evergreen Ridge remains a place of beauty and tranquility, its snowy landscape a testament to the resilience of nature and the spirits that watch over it. And sometimes, when the wind whispers through the pines and the snow glistens under the moonlight, I catch a glimpse of a shadowy figure standing at the edge of the clearing, watching over the village with a silent vigilance. It's a comforting presence, a guardian ensuring that the balance between life and the spirit world remains undisturbed. In the heart of the Rocky Mountains, where the snow never truly melts and the spirits never truly rest, the story of the frozen mailman lives on, a tale of love, loss, and the eternal quest for peace amidst the unforgiving wilderness. Story number 4. Frozen Terror, the Winter's Predator. The harsh winter winds of Alaska had a way of seeping into your very soul, a constant reminder of nature's unyielding power. My name is Tommy Anderson, a seasoned hunter who had spent most of his life navigating the unforgiving wilderness. When the opportunity arose to help out in the remote village of White Pine Falls during the peak of winter, I didn't hesitate. The village was small, nestled deep within the Alaska Range, and accessible only by a narrow, treacherous road that became nearly impassable under a heavy blanket of snow. White Pine Falls was a place where time seemed to stand still, where the outside world was a distant memory, and the community was tightly knit, bound together by shared hardships and mutual reliance. As the sole young member of a family line that had lived in the area for generations, I felt a deep sense of duty to support the elderly residents who couldn't fend for themselves in the relentless cold. My wife, Laura, and our teenage son, Jake, joined me, eager to embrace the challenge and the unique experience it offered. The first few days were routine, setting up supplies, ensuring the elderly had everything they needed, and braving the icy temperatures to hunt for food. The village was picturesque, with cabins dusted in snow and smoke curling from chimneys, creating a scene straight out of a postcard. But beneath the serene exterior lay an undercurrent of fear, an unspoken tension that permeated every interaction. It was on the third night that the legends of White Pine Falls began to feel disturbingly real. The villagers often spoke in hushed tones about the winter creature, a monstrous entity said to roam the surrounding forests each year, preying on those unlucky enough to cross its path. Most dismissed these stories as old wives' tales, remnants of a bygone era when superstition held more sway. I, however, had always maintained a healthy skepticism toward such folklore. That night, as the temperature plummeted and the wind howled outside, I was sitting by the fire in the communal cabin, sharing stories with a few of the elderly residents. The flickering flames cast long shadows on the walls, creating an atmosphere that was both cozy and eerily foreboding. Suddenly, a piercing howl shattered the silence, reverberating through the crisp night air. The sound was unlike anything I'd ever heard, a deep, guttural cry that seemed to emanate from the very soul of the forest. The room fell silent, eyes wide with fear as the howl echoed once more, closer this time. "That's just a wolf," Mike, one of the older men, said, trying to reassure everyone, though his voice wavered with uncertainty. But there was something different about that howl, something that sent a chill down my spine. The sound wasn't just a call, it felt like a lament, a mournful plea that resonated deep within me. I exchanged a worried glance with Laura, who simply nodded, sharing my unease. As the night wore on, the howls continued intermittently, each one more haunting than the last. The villagers huddled closer together, their fear palpable in the dimly lit cabin. Sleep eluded me as I lay awake, staring into the darkness beyond the windows, wondering what malevolent force could produce such a sound. The next morning, the village was covered in a thick layer of fresh snow, the aftermath of the night's blizzard. While everyone else went about their daily routines with subdued caution, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. It wasn't until later that day that my suspicions were confirmed. Jake, always the adventurous one, had ventured out to check on the snowmobile parked near the edge of the village. He returned, excitement and confusion etched on his face. "Dad, Mom, look at these," he said, pointing to a series of enormous footprints etched deep into the snow. I approached the prints, my brow furrowing as I took in their size and shape. These were no ordinary animal tracks. Each print was over a foot long, with deep claw marks that suggested a creature far larger and more terrifying than any wolf or bear. "These aren't from any animal I've seen around here," I muttered, my mind racing to identify what could have made them. Laura joined me, her eyes scanning the footprints with growing concern. "Do you think it's related to those stories about the winter creature?" Before I could respond, a sense of dread washed over me. The footprints led from the forest directly into the heart of the village, ending abruptly at the edge of our communal cabin. It was as if something, or someone, had entered our sanctuary. That night, the storm raged on, the howling winds now accompanied by the ominous sound of footsteps approaching the cabin. My heart pounded as I grabbed my flashlight and peeked through the window, only to catch a glimpse of a towering figure standing just beyond the tree line. Its form was massive, covered in thick, white fur that blended seamlessly with the snow-covered landscape. But it wasn't the fur that made my blood run cold, it was the creature's eyes. Glowing a menacing red, they pierced through the darkness, fixed intently on our cabin. I froze, unable to tear my eyes away from the horrifying sight. The creature began to move, its massive frame gliding effortlessly over the snow, closing the distance between us with terrifying speed. My instinct screamed at me to hide, to protect my family at all costs. "Sarah! Jake! Hide!" I shouted, pulling Laura and Jake into a nearby closet. We huddled together, our breaths shallow and rapid, as the creature's presence loomed outside. The door to the closet shook violently as the creature circled, its growls resonating through the walls. I could hear the sound of its claws scraping against the wooden exterior, each movement sending shivers down my spine. The air grew colder, the oppressive weight of fear pressing down on us. Suddenly, the creature let out a deafening roar, the sound echoing through the cabin like a death knell. The door to the closet was ripped open, and the creature stood before us, its eyes blazing with malevolent intent. I backed away, trying to fend it off with whatever I could find, but its thick fur was impervious to my makeshift weapons. "Run! Get out!" I yelled, pushing Laura and Jake towards the window. But before we could escape, the creature let out a bone-chilling growl and lunged at us, its claws tearing through the air with deadly precision. Panic surged through me as I tried to fight back, but the creature's strength was beyond anything I had ever encountered. It was as if the winter creature was a manifestation of pure terror, relentless and unyielding in its pursuit. In a desperate attempt to protect my family, I grabbed Jake and pulled him towards the door, breaking free of the creature's grasp just in time. We stumbled outside into the blinding snow, the cold biting at our exposed skin as we raced towards the nearby forest. The howling winds and the creature's furious cries chased us through the snow-covered trees, the landscape now a maze of frozen nightmares. Laura was frantic, her eyes wild with fear as she clutched Jake tightly. "We have to get to the trailhead. We'll find help there." But no matter how fast we ran, the creature seemed to gain on us, its red eyes glowing brighter with each passing moment. Just when all hope seemed lost, we burst through the trees and onto the narrow road leading out of the village. The sight of our truck in the distance fueled our desperation, and we sprinted towards it with everything we had. As we reached the vehicle, we could hear the creature's growls now just behind us, a relentless force that refused to let us escape. Marking the road, I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking uncontrollably as I tried to unlock the door. Finally, with a mixture of luck and sheer willpower, the engine roared to life, and we sped away from the village, the creature's presence lingering in our rearview mirror like a dark shadow. The drive was a blur of whiteout conditions, the storm intensifying as we fought to stay on the narrow, snow-covered road. The howling winds seemed to mirror the creature's anger, creating an atmosphere of pure chaos that made it difficult to focus on anything but survival. When we finally reached the outskirts of White Pine Falls, the storm began to abate, the howling winds slowly fading into the background. Exhausted and traumatized, we collapsed into the truck, the weight of what had transpired settling heavily upon us. The village, once a beacon of tranquility, had become a place of nightmares, its legends now horrifyingly real. In the weeks that followed, we struggled to come to terms with our ordeal. The local authorities dismissed our story as a combination of stress and overactive imaginations, but the evidence was undeniable. The bloodied footprints, the torn cabin, and the glowing red eyes in the snow were all too real to ignore. Determined to uncover the truth behind the winter creature, I delved into the village's history, piecing together stories of disappearances and unexplained phenomena that had plagued White Pine Falls for generations. It became clear that the winter creature was more than just a legend, it was a manifestation of the village's collective fear and sorrow, a dark force that thrived on the isolation and desperation of its inhabitants. One chilly evening, driven by a need for closure, I returned to White Pine Falls, armed with evidence and a determination to confront the entity that had terrorized my family. The village was eerily quiet, the snow still blanketing everything in sight, as if the storm had never lifted. I made my way to the communal cabin, the site of our harrowing encounter. The door creaked open, and I stepped inside, the familiar scent of pine and burning wood filling the air. But this time, there was no warmth, only an oppressive darkness that seemed to consume everything in its path. "Winter creature," I called out, my voice echoing through the silent cabin. "I know you're here. I understand your pain. Let us help you find peace." For a moment, there was only silence. Then, the air grew colder, and the howling winds began to seep through the cracks in the walls. The creature appeared once more, its form towering and menacing, yet there was a hint of sadness in its glowing red eyes. "I have no peace," it growled, its voice a haunting mix of sorrow and rage. "The snow never ends. The winter is eternal." I stepped forward, holding out my hands in a gesture of peace. "Let me help you. Tell me what you need." The creature hesitated, its form wavering as if torn between its rage and a longing for release. "You cannot help. The snow is my prison, my curse. No one can escape the winter's grasp. But I refuse to give up. There must be a way to break the curse. We can't keep living in fear." The creature's eyes softened slightly, the intensity of its gaze lessening. "Perhaps there is, a forgotten ritual, a way to release the spirits trapped by the eternal snow. But it requires sacrifice." I nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "What do you need me to do?" The creature extended a massive paw, pointing towards the deepest part of the forest, where the snow lay thick and undisturbed. "Retrieve the lost talisman. It holds the key to ending the curse." Without hesitation, I set out into the storm, following the creature's guidance. The forest was a labyrinth of white, the snow muffling every sound and obscuring every path. But I pressed on, driven by the need to save my family and the village from the winter creature's relentless terror. Hours passed as I navigated the treacherous terrain, the storm intensifying with each step. Finally, I reached a secluded clearing, the snow pristine and untouched except for a single, ornate box buried beneath the layers of ice. I reached down, my fingers numb from the cold, and retrieved the talisman, a silver pendant adorned with intricate symbols that seemed to glow with an inner light. As I made my way back to the cabin, the storm began to subside, the howling winds giving way to a still, heavy silence. I returned to the cabin, the talisman held tightly in my hand, and presented it to the winter creature. "Here," I said, holding out the pendant. "This is what you need to break the curse." The creature took the talisman, its massive hands trembling as it held the symbol of release. A blinding light enveloped the cabin, the symbols on the pendant glowing brighter with each passing second. The snow around us began to melt, the oppressive cold lifting as the curse that had bound the creature was finally broken. As the light faded, the winter creature stood before me, its form less menacing, the sorrow in its eyes giving way to a peaceful resignation. "Thank you," it whispered, its voice now filled with gratitude. "I am free." With those final words, the creature dissolved into a cascade of snowflakes that danced in the fading light, leaving behind a sense of calm and liberation that had long been absent from White Pine Falls. In the aftermath, the village slowly began to heal, the fear that had gripped us for so long now replaced by a renewed sense of hope and community. The legends of the winter creature were no longer tales of terror, but stories of redemption and the power of compassion in the face of darkness. As for me, the experience left an indelible mark on my soul. I returned to my life with a deeper understanding of the fragile balance between humanity and the forces of nature. And every winter, when the snow begins to fall and blanket the land in white, I remember the frozen terror that once haunted White Pine Falls, a reminder that even in the darkest of winters, there is always a glimmer of hope that can thaw the coldest of hearts. But sometimes, when the wind howls just right and the snow swirls in ethereal patterns, I catch a fleeting glimpse of glowing red eyes watching from the shadows, a silent guardian ensuring that the peace we fought so hard to achieve remains undisturbed. Story number 5. Silent Slopes. The Utah mountains in winter are a sight to behold, pristine, majestic, and unforgiving. I remember the first time I set foot in Timber Ridge Resort, the towering peaks dusted with fresh snow, the crisp air filling my lungs with every breath. As an avid snowboarder, I was drawn to the challenge of its steep slopes and untouched trails. But nothing could have prepared me for the nightmare that awaited me on those silent slopes. My name is Brian Collins, and snowboarding has always been more than just a hobby for me. It's a way to escape, to push my limits, and to find solace in the rhythm of the descent. Timber Ridge was my sanctuary, a place where I could lose myself in the thrill of the ride. But that winter, the mountains held secrets darker than the shadows cast by the setting sun. It was mid-February when I decided to explore the restricted area known as Widow's Peak. The signs were clear, no entry, but legends among the locals told tales of breathtaking views and untouched powder for those daring enough to venture beyond. Ignoring the warnings felt like a challenge I couldn't resist. After all, what harm could a few hours of adventure bring? On a crisp Saturday morning, I geared up, the anticipation coursing through me as I strapped on my snowboard. The sky was a clear blue, the sun shining brightly, casting a golden hue over the snow-covered landscape. I took one last glance at the marked trails before turning towards Widow's Peak, the forbidden zone that promised the untouched thrill I craved. The descent was exhilarating. The snow was soft, perfect for carving through the powder. As I navigated the treacherous slopes, the wind howled around me, the sound almost deafening against the silence of the untouched terrain. I felt a sense of liberation, the boundaries of the resort fading away as I delved deeper into the heart of the mountains. Halfway down, the weather began to change. Dark clouds rolled in swiftly, the once bright sky now overcast with heavy gray. A sense of unease settled over me as the temperature dropped, the snowflakes turning coarse and biting against my face. I glanced at my watch. It was late afternoon, and the storm was moving in fast. Realizing I needed to make it back, I increased my speed, but the path ahead seemed to disappear into the growing blizzard. Visibility dropped to near zero, the world around me a swirling mess of white and gray. Panic set in as I struggled to find my bearings, the familiar trails now obscured by the relentless snow. My heart pounded in my chest as I pushed forward, desperation fueling each frantic turn. Then, through the blinding snow, I spotted a faint outline of a wooden structure, an old cabin nestled between the trees. Without hesitation, I veered off the trail, my only hope of shelter in the midst of the raging storm. As I approached, the snow seemed to thin slightly, revealing the worn exterior of the cabin. It looked abandoned, yet the warm glow of a flickering candle suggested otherwise. I reached the door, the wind howling louder as I fumbled with the lock. After several tense moments, the door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit interior. The warmth inside was a welcome contrast to the bitter cold outside. I stepped in, my breath visible in the air, and quickly moved to secure the door against the storm. Inside, the cabin was cluttered with remnants of a bygone era, faded photographs, old furniture covered in dust, and a fireplace with ashes still warm. My eyes were drawn to a small table in the corner, where a leather-bound notebook lay open. Intrigued, I approached it, noticing the pages filled with hurried, illegible scribbles and desperate pleas. "Run," one entry read. "It's coming." Another page bore the words, "Don't look into its eyes." A chill ran down my spine as I realized these were the notes of someone who had sought refuge here before me, someone who had experienced the same terror I now felt creeping in. The storm outside intensified, the wind battering the cabin with renewed ferocity. I decided to try and make a phone call, hoping to reach someone for help, but my phone had no signal. Just as I turned to face the room, the door burst open, and a gust of snow swept through, extinguishing the candlelight. In the darkness, I heard footsteps approaching, slow and deliberate. My heart raced as I fumbled for my flashlight, the beam cutting through the blackness to reveal a towering figure standing at the entrance. It was massive, over 7 feet tall, with thick, matted fur covering its body and glowing red eyes that seemed to pierce through my very soul. Its claws scraped against the wooden floor as it advanced, the air around it growing colder with each step. I stumbled back, my mind reeling in disbelief and fear. "Please," I begged, my voice shaking. "I don't want any trouble. Let me go." The creature let out a guttural growl, its eyes never leaving mine. I felt a sense of dread wash over me, a primal fear that urged me to run, to escape this nightmare. But my legs wouldn't move, my body frozen in terror as the creature closed the distance between us. Desperate, I grabbed the notebook from the table, hoping to find some clue or spell that could ward off this malevolent presence. Flipping through the pages, I found more frantic messages, pleas for help, descriptions of the creature, warnings to others who might find themselves trapped in the cabin. As the creature loomed over me, I realized that this was no ordinary beast. It was a manifestation of the mountain's wrath, a guardian of the forbidden trails, punishing those who dared to trespass. The stories of missing snowboarders and lost hikers were not just legends, they were warnings that now felt all too real. Summoning every ounce of courage, I began to speak, my voice steady despite the fear gripping me. I understand now. Please, let us leave. We mean no harm. To my surprise, the creature hesitated, its eyes flickering with something that resembled sorrow. I continued, hoping to reach whatever fragment of humanity remained within this monstrous form. We didn't know. We just wanted the thrill, the adventure. Please, let us go. The creature took a step back, its expression unreadable. For a moment, the cabin was silent except for the raging storm outside. Then, it let out a mournful howl, a sound filled with pain and regret, before turning and disappearing into the shadows of the cabin. Shaken but unharmed, I quickly locked the door and stumbled out into the blizzard, the storm now a swirling tempest that threatened to engulf me. With the notebook clutched tightly in my hand, I navigated my way back to the trail, each step a battle against the biting cold and the howling winds. Hours later, exhausted and nearly numb from the cold, I finally made it back to the main trails, the storm beginning to abate. I found my way to the designated shelter area, where other snowboarders had gathered, huddled around small fires for warmth and comfort. They listened in stunned silence as I recounted my harrowing experience, the details eerily matching the stories of those who had vanished before me. The next morning, I woke up in the warmth of the shared shelter, the memory of the creature still vivid in my mind. As I glanced around, I noticed that some of the photos and notes from the cabin were scattered among our belongings, evidence of my time in the haunted refuge. A search party was organized to locate the missing snowboarders, but as the days passed, no trace of them was found. The mountain had claimed them, just as it had claimed me, but for a brief moment, I had escaped its clutches. The notebook I had salvaged from the cabin remained a chilling reminder of the night I faced the winter's predator and survived to tell the tale. Back in civilization, I shared my story with friends and family, the skepticism in their eyes a stark contrast to the terror that had consumed me. Yet, deep down, I knew the truth. The silent slopes of Timber Ridge held secrets that were best left undisturbed, guardians that enforced the mountain's unforgiving laws. Years have passed since that fateful winter, but the memory of the creature still lingers in my nightmares. The red eyes, the towering form, and the despair in its gaze are etched into my mind, a constant reminder of the thin line between adventure and peril in the heart of the wilderness. Every winter, as the snow begins to fall and the mountains call to those seeking thrill and solitude, I am haunted by the question, what if this time, the mountain decides to claim another soul? The silent slopes continue to stand as a testament to nature's raw power and the legends that warn us to respect its boundaries. And so, the stories persist, of missing snowboarders, of the winter's predator, and of the dangers that lie in the untouched corners of the Rockies. They serve as a chilling reminder that some adventures come with a price, and that the mountains, in all their silent majesty, watch over their domain with an unwavering, unforgiving eye.